business leaders in the Genesee County area have identified a couple specific issues with regard to public policy, and one of them certainly layers on to Ben's first issue, excuse me, which is that of the need of an infrastructure to support the willingness to enter into shared services among municipalities. There, I think, is a true willingness, and we're starting to see it in some early formulations of cooperation for shared public safety, for example, in small communities, but it's because they've come to a point where they've lost a millage and are forced to enter into an agreement, whereas there are many municipalities that aren't forced into that corner, but also don't find an infrastructure of expertise and resources around legal and around facilitation and mediation that can help municipalities find those win-win solutions. And that's something that we're certainly working on. Again, a good prima civitas collaboration. Former Lieutenant Governor John Cherry is involved with us on efforts in our area to identify resources to address that need for the facilitation, mediation, legal kinds of support that none of the individual municipalities has the ability to do from where they stand.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that one of the things that we're finding through these regional collaboration efforts is that economic development seems to be an easy one to work on together. We've done it in ways that have engaged the private sector as investors as well for a number of years. But there are many other big budget, big ticket items, especially public safety, that are critical to the citizens of each municipality and require that additional help. The other item I would list is infrastructure and the ability of the state to continue to fund just the maintenance and enhancement of current infrastructure is becoming really key. The condition of Michigan bridges, for example, is an area of great importance to our citizens as well as our businesses, and I think we need a both fiscal and just logistics policy on how we address those infrastructure needs.
I'm going to touch upon a sacred cow, and part of that it's having to do with public education, I guess, but it's directly related to workforce development. I mean, again, back to my 18th century sort of comment, I mean, why is it that we still have to have 4 years of high school? I mean, maybe we need to be tinkering, and maybe some pursuits ought to be 3 years or 2.5 years. Same with community colleges for associate's degrees. I know we're all about standardization, but maybe we need to get a lot more creative about how we're training even our kids. So maybe there isn't something sacred about 4 years or 2 years to get an associate's degree or get a 4-year degree from Michigan State or U of M. I mean, maybe I think that's, maybe it's time to re-examine. I think we've got fantastic teachers, and I think, frankly, any of us who have taught, I mean, are great. We've got great resources, but I can't stand it. I mean, we need workers now. There's a lot of if you put the combined time of taking summers off, that's almost a year. A year the kids would be in school. Same with community colleges. I mean, I think we can have 16 different degrees that vary in a couple of months to a couple of years. Maybe some are even longer than that. That's one. Sacred cow. I'm going to hear about it. Two, I think, again, infrastructure. And you've heard several of us talk about it, but I am absolutely fascinated by Act 275 of 2010, the next Michigan Development Corporation, which I think was a great step in the right direction of tying in, an emphasis upon infrastructure and land use. I mean, 2 or more modes of transportation that we're trying to facilitate. And that promotes good land use. I mean, that promotes, you know, and I think we need to be doing stuff like that a lot smarter on water and sewer. Frankly, some of the state's decision-making previously, I think, on making water and sewer grants and loans didn't help us in that regard. You know, we've got to be smarter again, and I know we have lots of people in this room, and including in the buildings outside here, who are thinking about it and working on it as well, but to policy-wise and to put stuff on the strategic planning cycle and think more long-term, I mean, as opposed to a calendar year. I mean, you know, so I think, you know, tying land use to funding, more initiatives like the next Michigan Development Corporation are helpful. Tax policy that promote regionalism, tax policy that promotes intergovernmental cooperation. Again, I mean, we're working on it, but, you know, we could probably accelerate it. You know, 3,000 political units, and I'm not advocating that they go away. Again, but I sure, you know, I mean, I spent a lot of time on trying to facilitate local units of government working together. You know, think out of the box. I mean, you got water sewer capacity, you don't. Well, maybe we ought to be thinking creatively about what that impact of that investment policy is going to be and where we're going to locate the next food processor. You know, we need more creative thinking, and you know, we're not going to solve it here, but we need to have those debates and those discussions and those decisions.
Thank you, Rick.
I'd like to echo Rick and Janice. You're going to hear it over and over again. Education, bringing back the need to train our high school students, bringing back the skill centers, the skilled trades. Auto class, shop class, welding class, all these classes that are cut and leaving the kids that don't really necessarily want a four-year degree. Where do they go now? Bringing back the apprenticeship programs and working with our manufacturers to bring those kids that don't want the four-year degree out of high school and into an apprenticeship program, into a manufacturer with just certifications. You don't need to have a degree to do these things. You can be trained on the job or to provide certificate programs. So I support that and echo that our workforce is dwindling in the manufacturing area, and we need to support those and bring those back. And then infrastructure. Infrastructure is key. Dredging, and you know, I sit on the river. Dredging is huge. In many, many ports, you're losing the capabilities to handle deep water ships. Currently, right now, we're in a situation of the same as many other ports in the state. We need some dredging activity. Our bridges, our roads, our infrastructure, not only the hard infrastructure, but the others, cellular, broadband. All of this needs to be taken into consideration and formed into policies. So I kind of echo my colleagues that education and our workforce development and ways to do that creatively and infrastructure.
Last but not least, and I'm not going to give you three things, I'll give you one thing. One, because I would agree with just about everything they've said, but if there was one strategy or one concept in Michigan that would improve our communities and improve the state's fortunes, it would be around the idea of competitiveness. Michigan being competitive. And we can define what that means, and it means a lot of things. We talked about workforce. Obviously, our workforce is competing against the workforce in Ohio, Indiana, South Carolina, all over. The death of the automotive industry is greatly exaggerated. That's Michigan's base industry, manufacturing and automotive in particular. And over the many years I've been in economic development, I've seen Michigan strategies come and go. We need to diversify, we need to do this, we need to do defense, whatever. Throughout that whole time period, automotive continued to be the predominant industry in Michigan, and it's going to continue to be that for a long time to come. And it's morphing. that industry it means something different today than it did 20 or 30 years ago. When you look at the advancements in the car, the technology that's in there, the telematics, you know, it used to be, you know, if you could swing a hammer or if you could weld, you know, or put two parts together, you worked on an automotive line and you were in good shape and made a good living. Well, today, we need, you know, highly skilled computer programmers working on cars. I mean, who thought about that 30 years ago? Nobody. No one did. So we have to be competitive because as much as we talk about diversification in this state, the reality is that there are other states out there that would love to take what we have. They want our automotive industry. They want our manufacturing base. They want to move it into their state. Look what Indiana just did, becoming a right-to-work state. What do you think that was all about? Do you think that was really about the union versus non-union issue? No. That was a political decision to make themselves more competitive. That's what that was about. Now, there was some side issues too. But anyway, that was the main point. So every day, you know, there are people from Indiana, Ohio, Tennessee, North Carolina, traveling into our state, meeting with our companies, trying to convince them to move. So why would they stay? Why would they move? And it comes down to competitiveness. If we have an environment that's conducive to them being successful, and we provide the capital that they need, and we provide the workforce that they need, and the infrastructure, they're going to want to be here and they'll stay and they'll grow in the state. But if we start to fail in any of those areas, you're going to see those companies moving. One of my biggest concerns going forward for all of our communities is what happens when our tool and die workers, for example, that are all in their 50s and 60s, but mainly 50s right now, when they start retiring, what are we going to do? Our kids today aren't interested in going into that trade. So two things need to happen in my mind. And Kristen hit on part of it. You know, we need to reinvest in our workforce programs, in our training programs, and we need some facilities, some institutes of excellence in those areas. We need electricians, we need plumbers, we need to bring that class of worker back to Michigan because they're leaving. They're retiring and they're leaving. So either we grow them here, and if we can't grow them here, then we need to recruit them. We need to go to other states and bring people that have those skills to Michigan. We need to do one or the other. But that's too important to us maintaining that base industry. And as I said, I don't think it's going anywhere. In Michigan, I think it's going to continue to be strong. It shrunk a little bit. You'll see it grow in the future, and then it'll probably shrink again. But as long as those companies stay financially viable, this is going to be the location for automotive in the world. So that's what I would say. We talked earlier about tax policy. What's that all about? Well, again, it's making Michigan more competitive. It's reducing one of those business costs that impact, you know, the decision that a company makes to locate here. But guess what? That's not the only one. We have unemployment insurance, we have utility rates that are all way above the national standards. So to be competitive, we have to find ways that we can continue to provide the services that people and businesses want and need, but we need to do it at a cost that's affordable. So how do we do that? Those are all public policy issues. I particularly think that the state needs to work in the area of utilities right now. We have to figure out what we can do to drill down on those costs a little bit and become more competitive because we're losing a lot of projects because of it. So those are my thoughts.